The crystal shards were still falling when the screaming started. Elizabeth felt it before she saw it. Patrick's hand went rigid against her waist. They were mid-waltz. The air pressure dropped like the world was inhaling before a storm. Then came the gunshots. Not celebration. Execution. 3 massive chandeliers exploded in sequence across the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom. Diamond fragments rained down on 300 guests in formal wear. Chaos erupted. "Get down!" Patrick yanked her toward the marble floor, but arms locked around Elizabeth from behind. Strong, professional, inevitable. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. Sweet, chemical, flooding her lungs with artificial sleep. She tried to scream his name, tried to claw at the hands holding her, but her muscles went liquid. The last thing she saw? Patrick's face. Horror-stricken, reaching for her, as men in black tactical suits formed a wall between them. Then, darkness. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. How long had she been out? Minutes? Hours? She had no idea. Elizabeth's first conscious thought was silk. The kind of thread count that shouldn't exist in a world where she'd spent 3 years budgeting for a wedding. She was still wearing her gown. The lace sleeves were intact. Pearl buttons still fastened at her wrists. But her veil? Gone. Her shoes? Gone. And when she flexed her fingers, they moved freely. No restraints. No zip ties. Nothing but the weight of her wedding rings. She forced her eyes open. White marble, veined with gold. Windows revealing the Hudson River glittering under moonlight like scattered coins. Art Deco lamps casting amber light across furniture that belonged in European estates. Her veil lay folded on a velvet chair, carefully arranged, like a museum piece. The door stood 15 feet away, heavy mahogany with brass hardware. Elizabeth sat up slowly. Her head was pounding. Listen. She was a trauma therapist. She'd counseled families in crisis, talked down paranoid fathers, negotiated with men who thought violence solved everything. She knew the psychology of captivity inside and out. But she'd never been the hostage before. She stood on shaking legs and tried the door. Unlocked. Hope flared bright and sharp in her chest, until she pulled it open and found a man standing in the hallway. Like he'd been waiting. Like he knew she'd try this. 40 years old. Graying at the temples. Wearing an expensive suit with apologetic eyes that didn't match the gun holstered at his hip. "Signora," he said quietly. "Don Moreno requests your presence." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "Where's Patrick? Where's my husband?" "Your husband is unharmed. Calling the police as we speak, I imagine." His expression stayed carefully neutral. "This way, please. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me." "Signora." He didn't raise his voice, didn't touch his weapon, but something in his tone made her stop. Don Moreno doesn't like to be kept waiting. The mansion was a monument to wealth and menace. Arched windows, stone statues of Roman gods standing sentinel, corridors lit by sconces that belonged in Venetian palaces. Elizabeth's bare feet touched cold marble, then warm carpet, then marble again, as Dumont Escobedo led her deeper into the estate. She counted turns, memorized doors, catalogued exits, like she'd taught her clients to do when trapped in dangerous homes. They passed a kitchen where staff worked in silence, a library with leather-bound books stacked to the ceiling, a ballroom with a grand piano catching moonlight. Each room screamed money, power, and the kind of danger that wore tailored suits. Dumont stopped before double doors carved with Renaissance scenes. Angels and demons locked in eternal combat. He knocked twice, paused, then opened without waiting for a response. The bride, Don Moreno. The study looked like it had been airlifted from a Venetian palazzo. Coffered ceilings, Persian rugs, walls lined with art that belonged in museums. A Caravaggio original hung behind a massive desk, the painter's signature darkness making the room feel smaller, more intimate, more dangerous. And standing with his back to her, hands clasped, staring at that painting like it held answers to questions she didn't understand. The man who'd stolen her wedding night, Musetti Moreno. He wore all black, tailored perfectly. Sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with scars, his dark hair styled with precision. Not a strand out of place despite whatever chaos he'd orchestrated tonight. When he turned, Elizabeth's breath caught despite herself. 36 years old. Sharp cheekbones. Strong jaw shadowed with stubble. Full lips that curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. And his eyes. Dark. Assessing. Intelligent in a way that made her therapist instincts scream warnings. He looked like exactly what he was. A very dangerous man who'd gotten very good at hiding it under expensive clothes. Mrs. Hunter. His voice was smooth as aged whiskey. Italian accent wrapping around her married name like ownership. Or may I call you Elizabeth? You can call me the woman you kidnapped. Fear sharpened into anger. Because anger was easier than terror. What is this? Ransom? Because if Patrick had money, had your parents pay for the Plaza Hotel wedding? Musetti's smile didn't reach his eyes. Yes, they wanted to give their daughter the fairy tale before she married a man who destroys families for a living. The room tilted. Patrick isn't. Patrick Hunter testified against my uncle Giancarlo 3 years ago. Musetti moved closer, each step deliberate, predatory. A securities fraud case. Simple, really. But your husband's cooperation? It connected threads the prosecutors hadn't seen. By the time they finished pulling, 27 men from my family were convicted. My uncle died in prison 6 months later. Heart attack, they said. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. I say it was a broken spirit. Elizabeth's training warred with rising panic. Patrick had mentioned a case years ago, before they were serious. A boss involved in illegal trading schemes, cooperation with the FBI, doing the right thing. He'd never mentioned names, never mentioned consequences, never mentioned the word Moreno. So you took me to make him suffer? She forced steadiness into her voice. I'm a trauma therapist. I work with families affected by violence, including children from organized crime backgrounds. I'm not part of whatever vendetta. I know exactly who you are, Dr. Jackson. Musetti stopped inches away, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Cedar. Smoke. Something darker she couldn't name. I know you volunteer at Street Jerome's Family Center. I know you've counseled the wives and children of men I've had disagreements with. I know you understand my world better than your husband ever could. He produced her phone from his jacket. The screen cracked from wherever it had fallen during the abduction. You're going to call Patrick, and you're going to tell him the truth. Elizabeth's heart hammered against her ribs. What truth? Musetti's eyes were black holes pulling light into darkness. That you belong to me now. Elizabeth's hands shook as Musetti placed the phone in her palm. The screen lit up with notifications. 43 missed calls from Patrick, 17 from her sister Allison. Dozens of texts, screaming panic in all caps. Put it on speaker. Musetti leaned against the desk with predatory casualness. And Elizabeth? Choose your words carefully. Patrick's safety depends on your cooperation. The threat was clear. She dialed with trembling fingers. Patrick answered before the first ring finished. Elizabeth! Oh my God, Elizabeth, where are you? Are you hurt? The FBI is here. They're tracking the call. Just stay on the line. Patrick. Her voice cracked on his name. I'm okay. Where are they keeping you? What do they want? Musetti's gaze burned into her. Waiting. Elizabeth closed her eyes. Her clinical mind raced through alternatives. Escape routes. Coded messages. But the gun Dumont carried. The dozens of men she'd glimpsed through windows. The impossible distance between her and freedom. It all collapsed into one terrible truth. She had no choice. Patrick, I need you to listen. Each word felt like swallowing glass. I need you to stop looking for me. What? No. Elizabeth, whatever they're making you say, I'm saying it because it's true. The lie tasted like poison. You testified against his family. You destroyed them. And now, she looked at Musetti, at the cold satisfaction in his eyes, and forced the words out. Now I belong to him. Silence. Then Patrick's voice, shattered. No, that's not Elizabeth. I'll fix this. I'll do whatever they want. There's nothing to fix. Tears burned her eyes, but she kept them from falling. I'm not your wife anymore, Patrick. Tell my parents I'm sorry. Tell Allison. Her voice broke. Tell her I love her. Elizabeth, please. Musetti reached over and ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth stood there, phone dead in her hand, wedding rings heavy as chains on her finger, and felt her old life die in real time. Musetti studied her with something that might have been approval. Well done, Dr. Jackson. Perhaps you understand the rules of this world better than I thought. Go to hell, she whispered. He smiled. A real one this time, sharp and dangerous. I've been there, Tesoro. It's where men like me are born. But Elizabeth was wrong about one thing. Hell wasn't where Musetti Moreno was born. Hell was what he'd spent 36 years building, brick by brick, body by body. Starting in a Naples apartment where his father's fists taught him that love and violence were the same language. Dumont escorted Elizabeth back to her room in silence. The marble hallways felt longer now, colder, like the mansion itself knew what she'd just done. What she'd been forced to say to the man she'd married less than 12 hours ago. I belong to him now. The words echoed in her head with every step. Patrick's shattered voice. The way he'd begged. The click of the call ending. Final. Irrevocable. Like a coffin closing. When they reached her door, Dumont paused. His hand hovered near the handle. For a moment, Elizabeth thought he might say something. Apologize. Explain. But he just opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Breakfast will be brought at 7, he said quietly. Don Moreno expects you'll be rested by then. Rested? Elizabeth's voice came out sharp. Bitter. He thinks I'm going to sleep after that? Dumont's eyes held something that might have been sympathy. Or pity. She couldn't tell which was worse. I suggest you try, Signora. Tomorrow will be difficult. The door closed. Elizabeth heard the lock click from the outside. So, not unlocked anymore. The illusion of freedom had lasted exactly as long as Musetti needed it to. She stood in the center of the room, still in her wedding gown, still wearing Patrick's rings. The silk suddenly felt suffocating, constricting. She clawed at the buttons with shaking fingers, fought with the lace, finally tore the dress off and let it pool on the floor like a corpse. Underneath, she wore the white lingerie her mother had insisted on. Something borrowed, something blue. All those stupid traditions for a marriage that had ended before the reception finished. Elizabeth sank onto the edge of the bed. The mattress was obscenely comfortable. Probably cost more than her student loans. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was a prisoner in luxury, a captive in silk sheets and marble halls. And the man holding her? He didn't want money. He wanted suffering. Patrick's suffering. Her suffering. A revenge so cold and calculated it made her skin crawl. But here's the thing about Elizabeth Jackson. She'd spent 7 years studying trauma, understanding it, learning how people broke and how they survived. She'd counseled wives who'd watched their husbands murdered, children who'd grown up in war zones disguised as family businesses, fathers who'd lost everything to violence and pride. She knew monsters. She'd sat across from them in therapy rooms and community centers, listened to them justify, rationalize, blame everyone but themselves. And she knew their patterns, their tells, their weaknesses. Musetti Moreno thought he was in control, thought he'd orchestrated the perfect revenge, taken Patrick's wife on his wedding night, forced her to declare ownership, shattered a man's world with a single phone call. But he'd made a mistake. He'd taken someone who understood his world. Someone trained to see past the armor, past the expensive suits and Renaissance paintings and smooth Italian accent. Someone who knew that men who needed this much control, they were terrified of losing it. Elizabeth stood, walked to the window. The Hudson River stretched dark and glittering below. Manhattan's lights winked in the distance. Freedom was right there, miles away but visible, close enough to taste. She pressed her palm against the glass. It was cold, unyielding, just like everything else in this place. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she'd start watching, learning, finding the cracks in Musetti's perfect revenge. Because every man had weaknesses, every monster had a wound. She just had to find his. Breakfast arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. A woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, wheeled in a cart loaded with fresh fruit, pastries, espresso, and orange juice. She didn't make eye contact, didn't speak, just arranged everything on a small table near the window and left. Elizabeth was wearing clothes she'd found in the closet. Designer labels. Her exact size. Someone had been planning this for a while. The thought made her stomach turn. She forced herself to eat. Trauma training 101. Keep your strength up. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you break. Maintain routines. Stay sharp. The espresso was perfect. She hated that. At 8:30, Dumont knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Don Moreno would like to speak with you, in the library. And if I refuse, then I carry you there. Which would be undignified for both of us. He said it without malice. Just fact. Please, Signora, don't make this harder than it needs to be. The library was breathtaking. 2 stories of books in dark wood shelving, leather chairs, a fireplace that could fit a small car, ladder tracks running along the walls for accessing higher shelves. It looked like something from a Victorian novel. Musetti stood by the fireplace. He'd changed. Black slacks, charcoal sweater, still expensive, still dangerous, but slightly less formal, like he was trying to appear approachable, human. "Good morning, Elizabeth." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." "I'd rather stand." "Suit yourself." He poured himself an espresso from a silver service. Didn't offer her one. "Did you sleep?" "What do you think?" "I think you're stronger than most people I've taken." He said it casually. Like kidnapping was a regular hobby. "Most are still crying, begging. You're angry. That's good. Anger is useful." "Useful for what?" "Survival." Musetti moved closer, not threatening, just present, filling the space with his presence. "You want to know why you're here, really here, beyond the obvious revenge. You already told me. Patrick destroyed your family. You're destroying his." "Partially true." Musetti set down his cup. "But not the whole story. 3 years ago, your husband walked into a federal prosecutor's office. He had information about securities fraud, insider trading. My uncle Giancarlo ran a network. Patrick worked at one of the firms we used. He saw the patterns, the money movements, and he talked." Elizabeth stayed quiet, let him explain. People always revealed more when they thought they were in control. The prosecutors loved him. A whistleblower with receipts, documents, emails. They built a case that didn't just take down my uncle. It unraveled everything. Shell companies, money laundering operations, protection networks, 27 arrests in 1 week. The Moreno family went from a powerhouse to a punchline. His voice stayed calm, but his hands? They'd curled into fists, unconscious, revealing. My uncle died 6 months into his sentence. Heart attack. But I know the truth. He couldn't survive being ordinary, being powerless, being nothing. So his heart just stopped. Musetti's jaw tightened. Patrick Hunter killed him. Not with a gun, with testimony, with cooperation, with betrayal. Betrayal? Elizabeth couldn't stop herself. Patrick reported a crime. That's not betrayal. That's called being a decent human being. Musetti's eyes flashed. Dark, dangerous. For a moment, Elizabeth thought she'd pushed too far. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Decent human being. Yes, I'm sure that's how he sees himself. The hero, the whistleblower, the man who chose justice over silence. He moved closer. Close enough that Elizabeth could smell his cologne again, cedar and smoke. But heroes don't understand consequences. They don't see the families destroyed, the children who lose fathers, the wives who lose husbands. They just see right and wrong, black and white. And you see what? Shades of gray that justify kidnapping an innocent woman? I see balance. Musetti's voice dropped. Intimate, dangerous. Patrick took my family. I took his wife. Patrick testified from safety. I'm making him live with the consequences. He destroyed us from a distance. I'm destroying him close enough to watch. The logic was twisted, psychotic. But Elizabeth recognized the pattern, trauma responses, unprocessed grief manifesting as vengeance. A man who'd lost everything finding meaning in inflicting the same loss on others. Classic displacement, classic projection, classic narcissistic injury leading to narcissistic rage. She filed it away, kept her face neutral. So what happens now? You keep me here forever? Patrick moves on? Your revenge loses meaning when he finds someone else? Something flickered across Musetti's face. He hadn't considered that. Good. She'd found a crack. Patrick won't move on, he said. But his voice carried less certainty. You don't know that. You don't know him. You're assuming he loved me enough to be destroyed by losing me. But what if you're wrong? What if this just makes him angry? What if the FBI finds this place? What if... Enough. Musetti's hand shot out, grabbed her wrist. Not painful, but firm. Controlling. You're trying to manipulate me. Psychological tactics. Very professional, Dr. Jackson. But I'm not one of your trauma patients. Elizabeth met his eyes, didn't flinch, then stop acting like one. For a long moment, they stood there, his hand on her wrist, her defiance meeting his control. The air between them charged with something neither wanted to acknowledge. Then Musetti released her, stepped back, ran a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed almost human, vulnerable. "You'll stay here," he said finally. "The mansion is yours to explore, but there are guards, cameras, escape attempts will be discouraged. Cooperate, and you'll be treated well. Cause problems, and things become less comfortable. Understand?" Crystal clear. "Good." He moved toward the door, paused. "And Elizabeth? Your sister Allison. She used to work for the FBI, Analyst Division, still has connections. If I were you, I wouldn't try contacting her. My people are watching. Any attempt to reach out will be noticed, and consequences will follow." He left. Dumont appeared to escort her back to her room. As they walked, Elizabeth's mind raced. Musetti had just confirmed something important. He was monitoring communications, watching for escape attempts, which meant he was worried, afraid. Behind all that control, there was fear. And fear? That was a weakness she could use. Back in her room, Elizabeth noticed something. The breakfast cart was still there. Untouched dishes, a napkin, a pen left behind by the servant who delivered it. She picked up the pen, held it like a weapon, like a lifeline. Then she grabbed the napkin and started writing. Not a letter, nothing obvious, just a grocery list. Mundane. Forgettable. Milk, eggs, coffee, Phoenix, bread, rising, butter, cheese, from, jam, ashes. Phoenix rising from ashes. Their childhood code. The one she and Allison had used when their father was murdered, when Elizabeth testified at 16, when they needed to say, "I'm in danger, come find me," without anyone else knowing. She folded the napkin, placed it under the fruit bowl, made it look like trash, something a servant would collect and throw away without reading. But Allison? If she somehow heard that call recording, if the FBI played it for her, if she thought to look deeper, check the mansion, ask servants, find discarded napkins. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was something. And right now, something was all Elizabeth had. 3 days passed in the mansion, 3 days of carefully orchestrated isolation, meals delivered on schedule, books provided when she asked, walks in the garden permitted with Dumont shadowing her every step. It was prison disguised as hospitality, captivity wrapped in silk and marble. Elizabeth used the time to watch, to learn, to build a psychological profile of her captor the way she'd been trained. Musetti appeared twice daily, morning coffee in the library, evening conversation in the study, always controlled, always calculated, always maintaining that dangerous balance between host and kidnapper. But she was starting to see the cracks, the way his jaw tightened when she mentioned family, the flicker in his eyes when she asked about his childhood, the carefully constructed walls he'd built around certain topics, forbidden zones, landmines in conversation. On the 4th morning, she found him in the library earlier than usual. He stood before a photograph on the mantel, old, faded, a family portrait from maybe 20 years ago. Young Musetti, maybe 16, standing beside a beautiful girl with dark eyes and his same sharp cheekbones. His sister, had to be. Her name was Juliana, he said without turning, like he'd sensed Elizabeth's presence. 5 years younger than me. She wanted to be a doctor, pediatrician. She loved children. Elizabeth approached slowly, studied the photograph. The girl's smile was genuine, bright, nothing like the darkness that surrounded her brother. What happened to her? Crossfire. The word came out flat, empty. Wrong place, wrong time. A hit meant for someone else. She was 21, had just started medical school, Columbia University. Full scholarship, everything ahead of her. He finally turned. His eyes were distant, lost in memory, in grief that hadn't healed. My uncle Giancarlo orchestrated the hit, not the one that killed her, the one she was caught in. He'd ordered an execution, didn't care about collateral damage, didn't care that his own niece was in that restaurant. Musetti's voice dropped, became something raw, unguarded. He called it unfortunate, an accident, the cost of doing business. Elizabeth's therapist instincts kicked in despite herself. This was the wound, the origin point. How old were you? 26. I'd just been brought into the family business. Uncle Giancarlo was grooming me, teaching me, showing me how power worked. He laughed bitterly. The day Juliana died, I realized what power actually meant. It meant men like him could kill your sister and call it business, could destroy your family and expect loyalty, could take everything that mattered and demand you smile and say thank you. But you stayed. Elizabeth kept her voice gentle, non-judgmental, the way she'd speak to any trauma survivor. You didn't leave. You built your own empire within his, because leaving meant her death was meaningless. Musetti moved to the window, stared out at the Hudson. I stayed because someone had to remember. Someone had to make sure men like Giancarlo faced consequences, even if those consequences came from inside the family. Did he face consequences? Musetti's smile was cold, sharp as broken glass. My uncle died in prison. Heart attack. But hearts don't just stop on their own. Not when someone decides they've lived long enough. The implication hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. Elizabeth should have been horrified, should have been planning her escape even harder. But instead she felt something unexpected, understanding. This man standing before her? He wasn't born a monster. He was built into one, piece by piece, loss by loss, until violence became the only language he knew. My father used to beat my mother, Musetti said suddenly, voice still distant, like he was talking to himself more than her. Every night, for years, over cold dinner, over imagined disrespect, over nothing at all. I'd hide in my room with Juliana, hold her ears so she couldn't hear the screaming, tell her stories about places we'd go when we were older. Safe places, places where fathers didn't use fists and mothers didn't cry. He turned to face Elizabeth. His eyes were different now, vulnerable, almost human. Uncle Giancarlo killed my father when I was 14, made it look like a rival family's work. My mother cried at the funeral. Actual tears. For the man who'd broken her bones for 20 years. Because at least the monster she knew was familiar. At least his violence had rules. Elizabeth's throat tightened. She'd heard stories like this before, in therapy sessions, in support groups, children raised in violence, learning that love and pain were the same thing, that family meant enduring, that loyalty was more important than safety. So your uncle became your father figure, she said quietly. He saved you from one monster and turned you into another. Is that your professional diagnosis, Dr. Jackson? It's my observation. Musetti studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for someone to see it, to name it, to acknowledge the truth he'd been carrying alone. You're right. He weaponized me, took a traumatized kid and molded him into something useful, something sharp, and I let him, because I didn't know there was another option. There's always another option. Not in my world. In my world, you're either the one inflicting pain or the one receiving it. There's no middle ground, no safe place, no way out. That's not true. Isn't it? Musetti moved closer. Close enough that Elizabeth could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of years carrying violence like armor. You think I don't know what I am? What I've become? I'm exactly what my uncle designed. A killer in expensive suits. A monster who speaks 3 languages and appreciates Renaissance art. But underneath, he tapped his chest. Underneath, I'm still that 14-year-old boy listening to his mother scream. Still that 26-year-old brother burying his sister. Still, that nephew who murdered his own uncle in a prison cell and called it justice. The confession should have terrified her, should have sent her running. But Elizabeth stood her ground, met his eyes, saw the fractures beneath his control. You're also the man who kept me unharmed, who gave me books and freedom to walk the gardens, who could have destroyed me and chose not to. That's not a monster. That's a man fighting what he was taught to be. For a moment, something shifted between them. The air changed, charged with recognition. 2 people who'd survived trauma. 2 people who understood that sometimes the worst prisons were the ones you built inside yourself. Then Dumont knocked. The spell broke. Don Moreno, Detective Turner is making inquiries. The FBI has traced the Plaza Hotel attack. They're canvassing witnesses. Musetti's walls slammed back up. The vulnerability vanished. He was the mafia boss again. Cold, calculated, in control. Let them search. They won't find anything. Dumont nodded and left. But Elizabeth caught something in his expression. Concern, conflict. The look of a man serving a master he no longer believed in. Later that afternoon, Dumont found Elizabeth in the garden. She was sitting by a fountain, watching koi fish circle in water so clear it looked fake. He sat beside her without asking permission. His gun was visible under his jacket. A reminder. A warning. "You're playing a dangerous game, Signora," he said quietly, getting close to him, making him talk about his past. "It's not wise. I'm a therapist. It's what I do. He's not your patient. He's your captor. Don't confuse the two." Dumont's voice carried genuine concern. "I've worked for Musetti for 12 years. I've seen men try to manipulate him. Women try to seduce him. Rivals try to outsmart him. They're all dead now. Every single one." Elizabeth turned to face him, studied his weathered face, the gray at his temples, the sadness in his eyes. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" Dumont's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd walk away. Then he sighed, pulled out his wallet, showed her a photograph. A girl, maybe 8 years old, dark curls, bright smile, birthday cake in front of her. "Her name was Natalia, my daughter. She died 6 years ago, caught in crossfire between rival families, just like Juliana, just like too many children in this world." His voice cracked. "I stayed because I thought I could prevent more deaths, make things safer. But all I've done is enable more violence, more pain, more loss." "Then help me," Elizabeth said urgently. "Help me get out of here. Help me end this before more people die." "I can't. He'll kill me, kill my wife, kill anyone I've ever cared about. That's how this works. That's how it always works." Dumont stood, looked down at her with hollow eyes. "But I can warn you. He's inviting you to dinner tonight. Private. No guards. He's testing you. Testing himself. And when men like Musetti test themselves, people get hurt. Be careful, Signora. Be very careful." He walked away, left Elizabeth alone with the coy and her racing thoughts. That evening, a servant brought a dress. Black, simple, elegant, Elizabeth's exact size. Again. She put it on because refusing seemed pointless. Seemed like giving Musetti more control than he already had. Dumont escorted her to a private dining room she hadn't seen before. Smaller, intimate, candles flickering on a table set for two, no guards visible, just Musetti standing by the window. He'd changed too. Black shirt. No tie. Almost casual. Almost normal. "Thank you for joining me," he said, like she'd had a choice. "Did I have an option?" "There's always an option, Elizabeth. You could have refused, forced me to drag you here, made this ugly." He pulled out her chair, a gentleman's gesture from a kidnapper. "But you didn't, because you're curious. You want to understand me, profile me, find weaknesses you can exploit." She sat. "Is that what you think?" "It's what I know." He poured wine. Red. Expensive. Probably older than her. "You're a therapist who specializes in trauma. You've spent the last 4 days studying me, cataloging my patterns, looking for the wound you can press, the trigger you can pull. It's admirable, professional, also completely transparent." Elizabeth took the wine, sipped. It was perfect. She was starting to hate how perfect everything was here. "If it's so transparent, why allow it?" "Because I'm curious too." Musetti sat across from her, held his glass but didn't drink. "I've taken hostages before. For ransom, for leverage, for punishment. They all react the same way. Terror, bargaining, breakdown. But you?" He leaned forward, eyes intense, searching. "You're different. You're analyzing me, fighting me, seeing me, and I want to know why. Maybe I'm just trying to survive." "No. Survival would be compliance, silence, waiting for rescue. You're doing something else. Something I don't understand." He paused, then asked the question that had clearly been eating at him. "Do you fear me, Elizabeth? Or do you fear what I remind you of?" The question hit like a physical blow. Elizabeth's breath caught. Because he was right. He'd seen it, understood it. This man sitting across from her? He reminded her of something. Someone. A memory she'd spent years burying. Suddenly she was 16 again, standing in her childhood home, hearing glass shatter, her father shouting, men's voices, rough, demanding. Then gunshots, screaming, her mother's voice telling her to hide, to run, to survive. She'd hidden in a closet, listened to her father die, listened to her mother beg, listened to men laugh as they ransacked their home for money that didn't exist. Drug debt, wrong place, wrong choices, wrong life that ended in blood on hardwood floors. "Elizabeth?" Musetti's voice pulled her back, concerned, almost gentle. "Where did you go?" She realized her hands were shaking, the wine glass trembling. She set it down before it spilled. "I was 16. Home invasion. My father owed money to the wrong people. They came to collect. He tried to fight. They killed him. My mother too. I hid, survived, testified, and spent the next decade trying to understand why some people choose violence, why some people become monsters." Musetti's expression shifted, softened. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers, warm, solid, human. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? You only investigated Patrick, not me, not my past, not the reasons I became a therapist who works with crime families." Elizabeth met his eyes, saw her own pain reflected back. "I help them because I understand them, because I know that trauma creates cycles, that hurt people, that monsters are made, not born. And you think I can be unmade? I think you're trying to be. Under all this revenge, all this control, all this pain you're inflicting on Patrick and me, I think you're screaming for someone to stop you, to save you from yourself." The silence that followed was deafening. They sat there, hands touching across a candlelit table, two broken people recognizing each other's fractures, two survivors of violence seeing past the roles they were supposed to play. Then Musetti pulled his hand back, cleared his throat. The walls went up again, but slower this time, more reluctant. "Dinner is getting cold." They ate in near silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else. Understanding. Connection. The beginning of something neither wanted to name. After Elizabeth returned to her room, Dumont stood in the hallway, watching, thinking. He'd heard everything through the security feed, seen the shift between them, the dangerous chemistry building. He pulled out a burner phone, the one he'd kept hidden for months, just in case, for moments exactly like this. He dialed a number he'd memorized years ago, a detective who'd once tried to recruit him, who'd promised protection, who'd said there was always a way out. Detective Turner answered on the third ring. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows where Elizabeth Jackson is," Dumont said quietly. "And someone who's ready to end this before it's too late." Detective Jake Turner sat in his cramped office at the 19th Precinct, staring at the security footage for the 100th time. The Plaza Hotel. Elizabeth Jackson's wedding reception. 3 chandeliers exploding in sequence. Tactical precision, professional execution, then chaos, screaming, smoke, and Elizabeth disappearing into a wall of men in black suits. 48 hours of investigation had yielded nothing. No prints, no witnesses willing to talk, no trace of the vehicles used. It was like the kidnappers had evaporated into air, which meant serious money, serious connections, serious danger. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Turner. "Detective. My name is Dumont Escobedo. I believe we spoke once, 3 years ago. You tried to recruit me as an informant." Turner sat up straight. He remembered. Escobedo. Musetti Moreno's right hand. Top enforcer. The one who'd politely declined witness protection and disappeared back into the family. "I remember. What do you want?" "To tell you where Elizabeth Jackson is, and to ask for protection when this is over." Turner grabbed a pen, started writing. "I'm listening." "She's being held at Musetti's estate, Hudson Valley. Off Route 9, 20-minute drive from Tarrytown. Mansion on the cliffs, Greystone, private road, heavy security." Dumont's voice was quiet, strained. "But you can't raid it yet. Musetti has protocols. Any sign of law enforcement, and he'll relocate her. You'll lose your window." "Then why are you telling me?" "Because this needs to end before more people die. Before he does something we can't come back from." Dumont paused. "And because Elizabeth Jackson reminds me of my daughter. I won't let another innocent girl get caught in this world's crossfire." "What's your play?" "Give me 72 hours. I'll create an opening. A way in that doesn't trigger his protocols. But you need to be ready." "And detective?" Dumont's voice hardened. "When you move fast. Musetti won't go down easy. He'll fight. And people will die." The line went dead. Turner immediately dialed another number. "Agent Reeves? It's Turner. I need a task force assembled. Hostage recovery. High-value target. And I need Elizabeth Jackson's sister. Allison Jackson. Former FBI analyst. Get her here now." 30 minutes later, Allison Jackson burst into Turner's office. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back, no makeup. She'd been living at the FBI field office since her sister's kidnapping, sleeping in conference rooms, analyzing footage, calling in every favor she had. "You found something?" she demanded. "Maybe. Tell me about Phoenix." Allison froze. Her eyes went wide. "What did you say?" "Phoenix. Does that mean something to you? Something specific to you and your sister?" "Oh my God." Allison sat down hard, her hands shaking. "Where did you hear that word?" Turner pulled up the wedding reception audio. The forced phone call between Elizabeth and Patrick. He'd listened to it dozens of times, analyzed every word, every inflection. But he'd missed something. Something only a sister would catch. Listen to this section, 23 seconds in. After she says, "I belong to him," there's background noise, a television or radio, faint, almost inaudible. But there. He enhanced the audio, isolated the background. A news broadcast. Weather report. Phoenix continues to rise with temperatures reaching 95 degrees. Meanwhile, ashes from the California wildfires. Allison's hand covered her mouth, tears streaming. That's not random background noise. She embedded it deliberately. Phoenix rising from ashes. It's our code. From when we were kids. After our parents died. It means, I'm in danger. Come find me. She's telling you she's alive. She's fighting, and she's waiting for rescue. Then what are we waiting for? Where is she? Turner explained about Dumont's call. The mansion. The 72-hour window. Allison wanted to move immediately. Storm the place. But Turner knew better. Rushing in would get Elizabeth killed. We wait, he said firmly. We prepare. And when Escobedo gives us the signal, we hit them with everything we have. 200 miles north, in a Brooklyn apartment, Olive Berkeley paced her living room. She'd been Elizabeth's best friend since graduate school. They'd survived thesis defenses together. Bad relationships. Worse jobs. Elizabeth had been her maid of honor when she'd married. Had held her during her divorce. Had been family when blood relatives failed. And now Elizabeth was gone. Kidnapped. Held by some mafia psychopath. While everyone just waited. Analyzed. Planned. Did nothing. Olive couldn't wait anymore. She'd done research, called contacts, asked dangerous questions, and she'd found a name. Don Cleto Vieri, Musetti Moreno's biggest rival. The man who'd been waiting years for an opportunity to destroy the Moreno family. If anyone could help, it was him. She dialed the number a bartender in Little Italy had given her. 3 rings. A man answered, accent thick, voice smooth. Yes? My name is Olive Berkeley. I'm a friend of Elizabeth Jackson, the woman Musetti Moreno kidnapped from the Plaza Hotel. I have information about his operation, and I want to make a deal. What kind of information? The kind that could bring him down. But I need guarantees. I need Elizabeth safe. I need protection. And I need this to happen fast. Meet me. Tonight. Brooklyn Docks. Pierre saith a Doygain. Come alone. We'll discuss terms. The line went dead. Olive grabbed her coat. She knew this was dangerous. Knew she was dealing with criminals. But Elizabeth would do the same for her. Would risk everything. Would walk into fire if it meant saving someone she loved. She took an Uber to the docks. Got out at Pier 47. The area was deserted, industrial. Nothing but shipping containers and shadows. A black SUV pulled up. 3 men got out. The one in front was older, 60s. Gray hair, expensive suit. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Miss Berkeley, I'm Don Cleto. Thank you for reaching out. Do you know where Elizabeth is? Can you help get her out? Of course. Musetti and I have business arrangements. I can negotiate, make calls, ensure your friend's safety. He gestured to the SUV. But we should discuss this somewhere more private, more secure. I'm not getting in that car. Then I'm afraid I can't help you. Cleto's smile vanished. You called me, Miss Berkeley. You offered information. You wanted a deal. Deals require trust. So either you get in the car, or you go home. And your friend remains Musetti's prisoner. Your choice. Olive hesitated. Every instinct screamed danger. But Elizabeth's face flashed in her mind. Her sister's voice at the wedding. The promise they'd made to each other. Always. No matter what. She got in the car. The door locked automatically. Child safety locks. No escape. The men climbed in. The SUV pulled away. And Cleto's smile returned. Predatory. Victorious. Thank you for making this easy, Miss Berkeley. You see, I don't need your information. I need leverage. And you just became exactly that. Olive's blood went cold. What? Musetti took something that wasn't his. A bride. A symbol. Now I'll do the same. Take his hostage's best friend. See how he likes having complications. Cleto leaned back. Relaxed. Don't worry. You'll be treated well. As long as Musetti cooperates. As long as he understands that I'm the one in control now. The SUV drove into the night. Olive's phone buzzed in her purse. Texts from her roommate, from her brother, from people who'd realized too late that she was gone. Musetti was in his study when the call came. Private line. Only his top people had the number. He answered expecting business. Updates. Reports. Instead, he heard Cleto's voice. Buonasera, Musetti. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Every muscle in Musetti's body went rigid. What do you want, Cleto? Just to have a friendly conversation. About boundaries, about respect, about how taking things that don't belong to you has consequences. Cleto's voice was casual, amused. I have Olive Berkeley, Elizabeth Jackson's best friend, sweet girl, very loyal, very stupid. She called me thinking I could help. Instead, I helped myself. Musetti's hand tightened on the phone. If you touch her, you'll what? Come after me? Start a war? Over a hostage's friend? Cleto laughed. No, Musetti. You'll negotiate. You'll trade. You'll give me something I want. Territory. Operations. Respect. And maybe I'll return Miss Berkeley. Maybe. What do you want? Your Bronx operations. Your shipping contracts. And your hostage, Elizabeth Jackson. Deliver her to me by midnight tomorrow, and Miss Berkeley lives. Refuse, and I'll send you pieces of her. Starting with fingers, then hands, then... You have 12 hours. Musetti's voice was ice. Pure. Lethal. 12 hours to return Olive Berkeley unharmed to a location I specify. If you don't, I'll burn your empire to the ground. I'll kill everyone you've ever cared about. I'll make you watch, and then I'll kill you slowly. So slowly you'll beg for death, and I'll keep you alive just to hear you beg longer. Big words from a man with no leverage. I don't need leverage, I need a target. And you just painted one on yourself. Musetti hung up. He stood there, breathing hard, rage flooding his system. The kind of rage that started wars, that burned cities, that left nothing but ash and regret. Then he heard footsteps. Elizabeth, standing in the doorway. She'd been reading in the next room, had heard everything. What happened? She asked, fear in her eyes. Not for herself, for something else. Olive. Musetti's voice was rough, strained. Your friend Olive, she tried to help you, contacted Cleto, and he took her. Elizabeth's face went white. She grabbed the doorframe for support. No, she wouldn't. She's smarter than... She loves you. Love makes people stupid. Musetti moved toward her. Cleto wants a trade. You for her, by tomorrow midnight. Then give him what he wants. Trade me, save her. Elizabeth's voice cracked, desperate. Olive has a brother, a mother. She's innocent. She doesn't deserve this. Neither did you. Musetti stopped in front of her, close enough to touch. And I'm not trading you. Not to him, not to anyone. Why? I'm just a hostage, just a pawn in your revenge. Why does it matter? Because somewhere in the last week, she'd stopped being just a hostage. Somewhere between the library conversations and the garden walks and the dinner where they'd shared wounds they'd never shown anyone else, she'd become something else. Something he couldn't name. Something he couldn't lose. Because you're mine, he said quietly, simply, like it explained everything. And I protect what's mine. Even if it costs Olive her life? It won't. Musetti pulled out his phone, started making calls. I'm going to get your friend back, but not by surrendering. By reminding Cleto why people fear the Moreno name. Why they learned decades ago not to touch what belongs to me. Elizabeth watched as he transformed. The man who'd shared vulnerability over dinner vanished. In his place stood the mafia boss, the killer. The strategist who'd built an empire on violence and fear. He called his soldiers, issued orders, mobilized teams, gathered intelligence, all within minutes, all with brutal efficiency. This was the side of him she'd heard about but never witnessed. The monster under the expensive suits. But here's what surprised her. He wasn't mindless, wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. Every decision was calculated, strategic, designed to minimize casualties while maximizing impact. He was protecting Olive, protecting her, protecting his own people. He was leading. And despite everything, Elizabeth found herself trusting him. "Musetti," she said softly. He turned, met her eyes. "Thank you, for helping her, for not trading me, for—" "Don't thank me yet." But his expression softened, just slightly. "Cleto made a mistake tonight. He thought taking your friend would break you, would force me to negotiate from weakness. Instead, he gave me something I've wanted for years. A reason to destroy him that even the other families will understand. You don't take civilians. You don't weaponize innocents. Those are the rules." And Cleto just broke them. He moved closer. Close enough that Elizabeth could feel his heat, his intensity, the controlled fury radiating off him like electricity. "No one touches what's mine, Elizabeth. Not your friend, not you, not anything I've claimed. Cleto will learn that. Every family in New York will learn that. And when this is over," his voice dropped, intimate, dangerous. "When your friend is safe and Cleto is buried, you and I are going to have a conversation about what comes next. Because this, whatever this is between us, it's not finished." Elizabeth's breath caught, her heart hammered. She should be terrified, should be planning escape, should be maintaining professional distance. Instead, she reached up, touched his face, let her hand rest against his jaw, felt him lean into it like a man starving for touch, for connection, for something real in a world of violence and lies. "Get Olive back," she whispered, "and we'll talk about whatever this is." Musetti's eyes darkened, with promise, with hunger, with something neither of them could afford but both desperately wanted. Then he pulled away, back to business, back to war. "Dumont," he called. His second appeared immediately. "Mobilize everyone, full tactical. We're hitting every one of Cleto's operations tonight, simultaneously. I want him isolated, panicked, weak, and then I want him brought to me, alive. Because his death is going to be very public, very painful, and very permanent." Dumont nodded, but his eyes flickered to Elizabeth. A warning, a reminder. This was the world she was falling into, the darkness she was choosing, the monster she was starting to care for. As Musetti coordinated his war, Elizabeth stood alone, watching, understanding. She'd asked him to save Olive. He was doing exactly that. But the cost would be measured in blood and bodies, and a debt she wasn't sure she could ever repay. And the terrifying part? She wasn't sure she wanted to. Musetti's war council lasted 3 hours. Elizabeth watched from the doorway as he coordinated strikes across 5 boroughs. Phone calls in rapid Italian. Maps spread across his desk. Red pins marking Cleto's operations, black pins marking his own forces. It was military precision applied to criminal enterprise. Strategic, calculated, terrifying in its efficiency. Dumont stood beside Musetti the entire time, offering intel, confirming locations. But Elizabeth noticed something. The older man's hands shook slightly. His jaw kept tightening, like he was carrying weight that was finally becoming too heavy, like a man approaching a cliff edge and deciding whether to jump. Around midnight, Musetti dismissed everyone except Dumont. Elizabeth started to leave too, give them privacy. But Dumont's voice stopped her. "Wait, Signora, you should hear this too." He looked at Musetti, something like resignation in his eyes. "You both should." Musetti's gaze sharpened. "Dangerous. What are you talking about?" "Isabella." The name hung in the air like a gunshot. "Your sister. There's something you don't know. Something I should have told you 5 years ago. Something that changes everything." The temperature in the room dropped. Musetti went perfectly still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "Choose your next words very carefully. She wasn't killed in crossfire." Dumont's voice was steady despite the fear Elizabeth could see in his posture. "It was targeted, deliberate. Your uncle Giancarlo ordered the hit personally. That's impossible. The investigation was manipulated by me on Giancarlo's orders." Dumont pulled out a flash drive, set it on the desk like a confession, like evidence, like a bomb. "Isabella came to me 3 weeks before she died. She had evidence, documents, recordings, proof that Giancarlo was trafficking children, using the family's shipping operations to move victims. She was going to testify, go to the FBI, bring down the entire operation." Elizabeth's breath caught. Suddenly pieces were clicking together, forming a picture she hadn't seen before. Giancarlo found out, Dumont continued. He couldn't let her talk, couldn't risk exposure, so he staged a hit, made it look like rival family crossfire, made it look like collateral damage. And he ordered me to bury the truth. To make sure you never knew that your own uncle murdered your sister to protect his empire. Musetti's face had gone white, then red, rage flooding his features like a tidal wave. His hand moved to the gun on his desk, fingers wrapping around the grip, knuckles white. You knew. His voice was barely above a whisper, barely controlled. For 5 years. You let me believe it was an accident. Let me mourn her as collateral damage. Let me build my entire existence around avenging a lie. Yes, Dumont didn't flinch, didn't make excuses. And I've lived with that guilt every day since. Watched you become exactly what Giancarlo wanted. Watched you turn into the monster he was molding. All because I was too much of a coward to tell you the truth. Why now? Musetti's gun was out, pointed at Dumont's chest, his hand steady despite the fury in his eyes. Why tell me now? Because Patrick Hunter's testimony? Dumont gestured at Elizabeth. It wasn't betrayal. It was justice. The securities fraud case connected to other investigations, including the trafficking operation. Your uncle went to prison for crimes that included what he did to Isabella. Patrick Hunter helped put away the man who murdered your sister. He didn't destroy your family. He avenged it. The words hit Elizabeth like lightning. Suddenly everything made sense. The revenge plot, the kidnapping, the twisted logic. Musetti had been punishing Patrick for the one thing that actually honored Isabella's memory. You've been fighting the wrong enemy, Elizabeth said quietly, stepping forward despite the gun, despite the danger. Patrick didn't betray your sister. He helped bring her killer to justice. Everything you've done, everything you've become, it's been aimed at the wrong target. Musetti's hand started shaking, the gun wavering. His entire world was crumbling. 5 years of purpose, 5 years of revenge, 5 years of becoming exactly what his uncle wanted him to be, all based on a lie. I should kill you, he said to Dumont, voice breaking. Right now, for what you did, for what you let me become. I know, Dumont closed his eyes, accepted it. I deserve it, have for years. But before you do, read what's on that drive. See the evidence Isabella collected. Understand what your uncle really was, what you've been protecting by carrying out his legacy of violence. Musetti's finger tightened on the trigger. Elizabeth could see him calculating, processing, the muscle in his jaw jumping, his breath coming hard and fast. He was seconds from pulling, seconds from adding another body to his count. Musetti, don't. Elizabeth moved between them, placed herself in the line of fire, her hand covering his on the gun. This isn't justice. This is what your uncle wanted. More death, more violence, more monsters creating monsters. Isabella wouldn't want this. You know she wouldn't. You don't know what she'd want, he was shouting now, tears streaming down his face, the armor finally cracking completely. You didn't know her, didn't lose her, didn't spend 5 years becoming a killer because you thought it meant something, because you thought it honored her memory. You're right. I didn't know her. Elizabeth's voice was gentle, steady, the way she'd speak to any trauma survivor on the edge. But I know you, and I know the man I've seen this past week isn't the monster your uncle created. He's the brother who loved his sister, who wanted to protect her, who's been carrying grief and rage because he never got to say goodbye properly, because he never got to know the truth. Musetti's hand dropped, the gun clattering to the floor, and then he broke, completely. The first time Elizabeth had seen him fully vulnerable, fully human, he sank to his knees, hands covering his face, sobs racking his body like earthquakes. I killed the wrong people, he choked out, built the wrong empire, became the wrong man, for nothing, all for nothing. Elizabeth dropped beside him, pulled him into her arms, let him collapse against her. This dangerous man, this killer, this captor who'd stolen her from her wedding. He buried his face in her shoulder and cried like the lost boy he'd been at 14, the grieving brother he'd been at 26, the broken man he'd been hiding under control and violence and expensive suits. Dumont watched for a moment, then quietly left, giving them privacy, giving Musetti space to fall apart without witnesses. The flash drive remained on the desk, evidence of truth that had come 5 years too late. Elizabeth held Musetti as he shattered, stroked his hair, murmured comfort she'd offered to dozens of clients, but never to a man who held her captive. She should hate him, should want him destroyed, should be celebrating this breakdown as weakness she could exploit. Instead, she felt his pain, understood it, recognized the weight of carrying trauma that reshaped your entire existence. She'd done the same thing after her parents died, built her career around understanding violence, trying to prevent others from experiencing what she'd survived, becoming someone her 16-year-old self wouldn't recognize. They were the same, both survivors, both damaged, both trying to make meaning from senseless loss. "I'm sorry," Musetti whispered against her shoulder, "for taking you, for hurting you, for becoming exactly what I swore I'd never be. I know." And somehow, she did. Somehow, in this impossible situation, she understood him completely. He pulled back, looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Vulnerable, raw, beautiful in his brokenness. His hand came up, cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. "You should run," he said hoarsely. "The second you get the chance, run and never look back, because I'm dangerous, I'm broken, and I don't know how to be anything else." "What if I don't want to run?" The words escaped before Elizabeth could stop them, before she could think about how wrong they were, how impossible. Musetti's breath hitched. His eyes dropped to her lips. "Don't say that. Don't give me hope I don't deserve. Maybe neither of us deserves this. But maybe that doesn't matter anymore." The space between them charged with electricity, tension, want. He leaned forward. She didn't pull away. His forehead pressed against hers, breathing the same air, sharing the same impossible moment. "If I kiss you right now," he whispered, "everything changes. We can't go back. Can't pretend this is just captor and hostage. Can't." "Then don't." Elizabeth's voice shook. "Because you're right, it's wrong, it's impossible, it's—" He kissed her anyway. Soft, desperate, full of grief and want and something neither could name. Elizabeth should have fought, should have pulled away, should have remembered that this man kidnapped her, destroyed her wedding, forced her to betray Patrick. Instead, she kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer, deeper, like if he held tight enough, maybe the world would stop falling apart. Maybe the last week would make sense. Maybe two broken people could create something whole. Then reality crashed back. Elizabeth jerked away, scrambled backward, her hand covering her mouth like she could erase what just happened. No, we can't, this is wrong." Musetti's voice was rough, wrecked. "Impossible. Exactly what we both said. I'm engaged, was engaged, am married, I don't even know anymore." Elizabeth stood on shaking legs. "And you're my kidnapper. This is Stockholm Syndrome. Trauma bonding. It's not real. Isn't it?" Musetti stood too, putting distance between them, rebuilding walls that had crumbled. "Because it feels pretty real to me." Before Elizabeth could respond, an explosion rocked the mansion. Glass shattered. Alarms screamed. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Dumont burst through the door, gun drawn, face grim. "We're under attack. FBI on the north side." But it's not just them. Cleto's men hit the south entrance simultaneously. They knew. Someone told them the FBI was coming. They're using the raid as cover. Musetti transformed instantly. The broken man vanished. The mafia boss returned. Cold, calculating, lethal. "Get Elizabeth to the safe room. Now." "And Dumont?" He grabbed the flash drive, pocketed it. "We finish this conversation later. All of us. If we survive." More explosions, more gunfire. The mansion was under siege from two sides. Law enforcement trying to rescue Elizabeth, Cleto's forces trying to capture her, and Musetti caught in the middle, trying to protect the woman who'd just kissed him, who'd just made everything infinitely more complicated. Elizabeth ran with Dumont toward the interior of the mansion. Behind her, she heard Musetti shouting orders, mobilizing his forces, preparing for war. The weight of ghosts had finally lifted. The truth had finally emerged. But the cost of that truth? It was being paid in bullets and blood and a siege that could destroy them all. The safe room was 3 levels down, reinforced steel, no windows, emergency supplies. Dumont pushed Elizabeth inside, but she grabbed the doorframe, refused to enter. "I'm not hiding while people die. You're not equipped for this, Signora. Please, don't make me force you." Another explosion. Closer this time. The walls shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Gunfire intensified. Automatic weapons. Professional. Deadly. Through the chaos, Elizabeth heard voices. English. "FBI. Anyone inside? "Identify yourself," mixed with Italian curses. Cleto's men. They'd infiltrated during the confusion, using the federal raid as camouflage for their own assault. Musetti appeared at the top of the stairs, blood on his shirt, gun in hand, 3 of his men behind him. "Dumont! They breached the east wing. We need to fall back. Use the tunnels." "The tunnels?" Elizabeth looked between them. Prohibition era. Bootleggers used them to move product. They run under the river. Exit in Tarrytown. Musetti grabbed her arm. "Not rough. Urgent. We go now or we don't go at all." More gunfire. A window exploded. Someone screamed. Elizabeth's training kicked in despite the terror. In crisis situations, you follow the person with the plan. You don't argue. You move. They ran through corridors Elizabeth had walked peacefully just hours before. Now they were war zones. Smoke filled the air. Acrid. Choking. Emergency lights cast everything in red, like the mansion was bleeding. A door ahead burst open. 2 men in tactical gear. FBI markings. They saw Elizabeth. Started shouting, "Elizabeth Jackson! We're here to rescue you! Get down!" But then shots came from behind them. Cleto's men, using the federal agents as shields. Bullets tore through the hallway. The FBI agents went down. One of Musetti's men too. Just gone. That fast. Musetti returned fire, grabbed Elizabeth, pulled her through a side door into the kitchen. Dumont followed, slammed the door, shoved a heavy table against it. "The tunnel entrance is in the wine cellar," Dumont panted. "Through the pantry, down the stairs, but it's exposed. They'll see us. Then we make them look elsewhere." Musetti handed Elizabeth a gun. She stared at it like a foreign object. "You know how to use this?" "I'm a therapist, not a soldier." "Aim, pull trigger, repeat." He checked his own weapon. Reloaded. His movements automatic, practiced. This was his world. Violence and survival. "Stay behind me. Stay low. And if something happens to me, you run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand? Nothing's happening to you." "Elizabeth." "I said nothing's happening to you." She gripped the gun. It was heavier than expected. Cold. Deadly. "We're all getting out. Together." Musetti's eyes softened. Just for a second. Then the door exploded inward. Not kicked. Blown. Breaching charge. Professional military tactics. Cleto's men weren't playing games. 4 soldiers poured through. Body armor. Assault rifles. They saw Musetti. Started firing. Elizabeth screamed. Ducked. The world became noise and muzzle flashes and impossible chaos. Dumont moved first. Stepped directly into the line of fire, shielding Elizabeth with his body, returning fire with precision, taking down 2 attackers. But the third got him. Center mass. The impact threw him backward into Elizabeth's arms. "No, Dumont!" She lowered him to the floor, blood soaking his shirt. Too much blood. "Stay with me, please." He coughed, red on his lips. His hand grabbed hers, weak, trembling. "Signora, listen, you have to. Save him. The paramedics will come. The FBI will." "Not from bullets." Dumont's eyes locked on hers, desperate, fading. "From himself. He's good man, under everything. Natalia, my daughter. She would have liked him. Before. When he still remembered how to be human." His grip tightened. "Final message. Final mission. You remind him. Promise me. Save him from himself." I promise, Dumont. I'll try." He smiled, peaceful, like he'd been waiting years to hear those words, to unload that burden. Then his hand went slack, his eyes unfocused, gone. Elizabeth had seen death before, in therapy sessions, in case files, in nightmares about her parents. But this was different. This man had protected her, shown her compassion, defied his own boss to contact the FBI. And now he was dead in her arms because he'd stepped between her and bullets. "Elizabeth, we have to move." Musetti pulled her up. His face was grief and rage. He'd lost his most loyal man, his friend. But there was no time for mourning, no time for anything except survival. They ran. Through the pantry, down stone stairs slick with decades of moisture. The wine cellar was medieval, barrel vaults, racks holding bottles worth thousands. And in the back corner, hidden behind a false wall, A tunnel entrance, black, yawning, terrifying. Musetti grabbed a flashlight. Emergency supplies stored near the entrance. Stay close. Watch your step. The tunnel floods sometimes. There's standing water. They entered the darkness. Behind them, the mansion shook. More explosions. The FBI was advancing. Cleto's men were fighting. Musetti's remaining forces were making last stands. The world was ending in fire and violence and justice colliding with revenge. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic. Brick walls from another century. Water up to their ankles. Cold. Smelling of mold and river water and fear. Elizabeth's clothes were soaked. The designer outfit from the closet now torn and filthy. Blood on her hands from Dumont. Ash in her hair from the burning mansion. They'd gone maybe 50 yards when Musetti stopped. Listened. Footsteps behind them. Splashing. Multiple people. Cleto's men had found the tunnel. Run, Musetti commanded. I'll slow them down. No, we run together or not at all. Elizabeth, I can't protect you and fight them. Then give me a weapon and we fight together. He stared at her. This woman he'd kidnapped. This therapist who should be cowering. She was covered in blood and ash and terror. But she wasn't running, wasn't leaving him. She was choosing to stand. You're insane, he said. Probably. Now give me a gun. He handed her a backup piece from his ankle holster. Showed her how to release the safety. How to aim in low light. Then they positioned themselves. Used the tunnel curves as cover. Waited for their pursuers. 3 men came around the bend. Tactical lights cutting through darkness. They saw Musetti. Started shouting in Italian. Raising weapons. But Elizabeth fired first. The gun kicked in her hands. Loud in the enclosed space. Deafening. She missed. But the distraction let Musetti take 2 clean shots. Both hit. The men went down. The third retreated. Calling for backup. They had maybe minutes. Maybe less. Move! Musetti grabbed her hand. They ran deeper into the tunnel. Stumbling over uneven ground. The flashlight beam bouncing wildly. Behind them, more voices. More splashing. An army coming. Then Musetti grunted. Stumbled. His hand going to his side. When he pulled it away, it was red. Wet. He'd been hit. Elizabeth hadn't even heard the shot. So much noise. So much chaos. But he was bleeding. How bad? She asked. Already knowing. Already seeing. Bad enough. Keep moving. I'll slow them. Stop being a martyr and lean on me. Elizabeth got under his arm. Supported his weight. He was heavy, tall, built like someone who'd spent years training for violence. But she was strong too. Strong enough. We're not dying in this tunnel. Either of us. Now move. They staggered forward. The tunnel seemed endless. Time lost meaning. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Elizabeth's muscles screamed. Her lungs burned. Musetti's breathing was labored. Wet. Each step harder than the last. Finally, light ahead. Faint. Gray. The exit. They burst out into pre-dawn darkness on the Terrytown riverbank. Empty. Isolated. Boat docks and industrial buildings. No people. No witnesses. Behind them, the tunnel spat out more of Cleto's men. Elizabeth raised her gun. Fired. Missed. Fired again. Hit something. Someone screamed. But there were too many. They'd be overrun in seconds. Then Musetti pushed her aside, positioned himself between her and the attackers, taking the bullets meant for her. One hit his shoulder, another his leg. He went down hard, but not before taking 3 more shooters with him. Elizabeth screamed, dragged him behind a concrete pylon, her hands pressed against his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to keep him conscious. He'd been shot 3 times, maybe 4. She couldn't tell. Too much blood, too much damage. Sirens approached. Lots of them. The FBI had tracked them, was converging. Cleto's remaining men heard it too. Started retreating. They'd failed their mission. Lost too many soldiers. The element of surprise was gone. Elizabeth was alone on a riverbank with a dying man. The mansion burned behind them, visible across the water. Flames reaching into the sky. Smoke billowing. Everything Musetti had built. Everything he'd become. Collapsing into ash and ruin. She held him as he faded, his eyes struggling to focus. Blood on his lips. His hand found hers, gripped weak, apologetic. Elizabeth, I'm sorry. For everything. For taking you. For ruining. your life. You deserved better than this, better than me. Stop talking. Save your strength. The paramedics are coming. You're going to be fine. We both know that's not true. He coughed. More blood. But thank you. For lying. For staying. For reminding me what it felt like to be human. Tears streamed down Elizabeth's face. She didn't know why she was crying. This man had destroyed her wedding night, held her captive, forced her into impossible situations. She should be celebrating his death, should be grateful for freedom. Instead, she leaned close, pressed her forehead to his, whispered words she didn't understand but couldn't stop. Don't you dare die before I forgive you. Don't you dare leave me like this. Don't. His eyes closed, his breathing stopped, and Elizabeth Jackson, former bride, current hostage, accidental survivor. She screamed into the dawn as the world burned behind her, and the man she'd started to care for died in her arms. Then his chest moved. Shallow. Barely there, but breathing. Still alive. Barely. Impossibly. The sirens got louder. Help was coming. Maybe too late. Maybe just in time. Either way, everything had changed. The old world was ash. The old life was gone. And whatever came next, it would be built from the ruins of this impossible, violent, transformative night. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and second chances. Elizabeth sat in a chair she'd occupied for 3 days straight. Olive had brought her clean clothes. Her sister Allison had brought food she didn't eat. The FBI had brought questions she'd deflected, but she hadn't left, hadn't moved except to use the bathroom, hadn't abandoned the man who'd taken a bullet meant for her. Musetti Moreno lay unconscious in the bed. Tubes, monitors, machines breathing for him when his own lungs struggled. 4 gunshot wounds, emergency surgery, touch and go for the first 48 hours. The doctors said he was lucky. Elizabeth wasn't sure luck had anything to do with surviving what should have killed him. An FBI agent stood outside the door, armed, watching. Musetti was both patient and prisoner. The moment he woke, he'd be read his rights, processed. Charged with kidnapping, racketeering, weapons violations. The list went on. But he'd also be offered a deal. Cooperation in exchange for leniency. Testimony against Cleto's organization. Information that could dismantle rival families. Detective Turner had explained it all. Calm, professional, like he was negotiating a business transaction instead of a woman's entire future. You're free to go, Miss Jackson. Anytime. The charges against Moreno don't require your participation if you don't want to press them. But if you choose to testify, we can offer immunity. Protection. A fresh start. Elizabeth had nodded, said she'd think about it, then gone right back to Musetti's bedside. On the 4th morning, his eyes opened. Slow, confused. Pain medication fogging his awareness. He saw the hospital ceiling, the monitors, then her. His focus sharpened. Elizabeth. His voice was rough, damaged from intubation. You're still here. Where else would I be? Free, safe, away from me. He tried to sit up, winced, fell back. The FBI. Did they? They got Cleto. Most of his top people. The assault on the mansion gave them probable cause for everything. Warrants, raids, assets frozen. His empire's finished. Elizabeth leaned forward, took his hand. Olive safe. They found her in a warehouse in Brooklyn. Scared, bruised, but alive. She's been here, actually, asking about you. Why would she do that? Because I told her what you did, how you protected me, how you risked everything to get her back. Elizabeth's throat tightened. Dumont didn't make it. You know that, right? Musetti closed his eyes, grief washing over his features. He called the FBI, set up the raid. I figured it out during the assault, saw how they knew our protocols, our weak points. He was trying to end it, trying to save all of us from ourselves. He died protecting me. His last words were about you. Asked me to save you from yourself, to remind you that you were a good man underneath everything. He was wrong. I'm not. Stop. Elizabeth squeezed his hand, hard. I've spent 4 days watching you fight to stay alive, listening to nurses talk about how you kept saying my name during surgery, how even unconscious, you were trying to protect me. That's not a monster. That's a man worth saving. A knock interrupted them. Allison stood in the doorway. Older sister, former FBI analyst, current protective guardian who'd spent a week thinking Elizabeth was dead or worse. Can I have a minute? Allison asked. her eyes on Musetti, assessing, judging. Elizabeth started to stand, but Musetti's grip tightened. "Stay, please. Whatever she needs to say, you should hear it too." Allison entered, closed the door. The FBI agent outside didn't stop her. Family privilege. She pulled up another chair. "Saturday studied the man who'd kidnapped her sister. Patrick called," she said bluntly. 3 times, he wanted to see Elizabeth, make sure she was okay. But when I told him where she was, who she was with, Allison's jaw tightened. He hung up, said he couldn't do this, couldn't compete with whatever Stockholm Syndrome was happening. He filed for annulment yesterday. His lawyer sent papers. It's over. Elizabeth felt the words hit, but not the way she expected. No grief, no loss, just acceptance. Her marriage had ended before it began. Patrick had moved on, was probably relieved. Based on what Turner had revealed about the affair, Patrick had wanted out anyway. The kidnapping just gave him an excuse. "I'm sorry," Musetti said quietly. "To Elizabeth, to Allison, to the situation. I destroyed your wedding, your marriage, your life. There's no apology big enough for that." "You're right, there isn't." Allison leaned forward, fierce, protective. "But here's the thing. Elizabeth called me twice during captivity. Once was the forced call where she embedded our childhood code. The second was yesterday, from this hospital. Know what she said?" Elizabeth's face flushed. "Allison, don't..." She said, "I think I'm falling in love with my kidnapper, and I don't know if it's trauma or truth, but I can't walk away." Allison's eyes stayed on Musetti. Sharp, unforgiving. "So here's my question. Are you going to hurt her again? Break her? Use her? Or are you actually capable of being the man she thinks you can be?" Musetti's hand tightened on Elizabeth's, his eyes never leaving Allison's. "I've spent 15 years being a monster. It's easier, safer, requires less vulnerability. But your sister?" His voice cracked. "She saw through that, saw the parts of me I thought were dead. And I don't know if I can be what she deserves. But I want to try. If she'll let me. If you'll let me." Allison studied him for a long moment, then stood. "Thanksgiving's in 6 months. You're invited. But show up like a criminal, and I'll shoot you myself. Show up like a man trying to earn my sister's trust? We'll talk." She kissed Elizabeth's forehead, whispered, "Follow your heart, not your trauma. And if your heart says this is real, I'll support you, even if I don't understand it." She left. Elizabeth exhaled. Hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. "Your sister's terrifying," Musetti said. "She's protective. There's a difference." Elizabeth stood, moved to the edge of his bed, looked down at this man who'd changed everything. "The FBI wants me to testify against you. They say I'm the key to prosecution, the sympathetic victim who can sway juries. You should do it. Tell them everything. I deserve whatever punishment. Or, I tell them the truth, the whole truth, not just the kidnapping, but what came after. How you kept me safe, unharmed. How you protected me during the assault. How you took bullets meant for me." Elizabeth's hand traced the bandage on his shoulder. "How you showed me that monsters can choose to be human again. That won't save me from prison. No, but it might save you from life in prison. Might get you a deal. Reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. Information on Cleto, on your uncle's operations, on trafficking rings and money laundering." She leaned closer, close enough to feel his breath. "You told me once you wanted to honor Juliana's memory. Here's your chance. Use what you know to bring down the same systems that killed her. Become the man she would have wanted you to be." Musetti's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this? After everything I did, why help me?" "Because Dumont was right. You're a good man underneath. And I'm a therapist who specializes in helping people heal from trauma, helping them become better versions of themselves." She smiled. Sad. Honest. "Also because somewhere between the library conversations and the dinner and the moment you shielded me from bullets, I fell in love with you, and I'm choosing to believe that's real. Not trauma. Not Stockholm Syndrome. Just 2 broken people finding something whole in the wreckage." He pulled her down, kissed her, gentle, reverent, like she was something precious he'd been given but didn't deserve. "I love you too. Which is insane. Which is impossible. Which is probably the only real thing I've felt in 15 years. The kiss deepened, became promise, became commitment, became the beginning of something neither could predict but both were willing to fight for. 2 weeks later, Olive visited Elizabeth's apartment. She'd been released from the hospital. Physically fine, emotionally shaken, but alive. She hugged Elizabeth for 5 minutes straight, cried, apologized for being reckless, for contacting Cleto, for nearly getting them all killed. "I thought I could help," Olive said. "Thought I could be brave like you. Instead, I almost destroyed everything." "You survived. That's what matters." Elizabeth made tea, sat with her best friend. "And honestly, your kidnapping changed things. Made Musetti show his humanity. Proved he wasn't the monster he pretended to be. You really love him, don't you?" "Is that insane?" Olive considered, then smiled. "Genuine. Understanding. Probably. But I've known you for 8 years. Watched you date safe men. Boring men. Men who never challenged you. Never saw the parts of you that trauma created." She took Elizabeth's hand. "This man? He's dangerous. He's broken. He's impossible. But when you talk about him, you sound alive. So follow your heart, not your trauma. And if your heart says he's worth the risk, then I'll support you, even if I don't fully understand." The same advice Allison had given. The same choice Elizabeth had already made. 3 months later, she testified. The courtroom was packed. Media, families of Cleto's victims, FBI agents, and Patrick. Sitting in the back, remarried already, his new wife beside him. He didn't look angry, just relieved, like Elizabeth's kidnapping had freed him from a marriage he'd regretted before the ceremony ended. Elizabeth took the stand, told the truth, the whole truth. Yes, Musetti had kidnapped her. Yes, she'd been terrified, but she also described his protection, his evolution, the way he'd saved Olive, shielded Elizabeth, cooperated with authorities to dismantle Cleto's network and expose his uncle's crimes. "He's not innocent," she concluded, looking directly at Musetti, at the man she'd chosen despite everything. "But he's not the monster the prosecution is painting either. He's a man who made terrible choices, who built a life from trauma and violence, and who's trying for the first time to become something better. That deserves recognition. That deserves a chance at redemption." The prosecution tried to discredit her, suggested Stockholm Syndrome, manipulation, but Elizabeth held firm. She was a trauma therapist with a doctorate. She understood psychological phenomena. This wasn't captivity bonding. This was choice. In the end, Musetti pleaded guilty to reduced charges. Kidnapping reduced to unlawful restraint. Racketeering charges dropped in exchange for testimony. 3 years probation, community service, mandatory therapy, and full cooperation with ongoing investigations into organized crime. The judge looked skeptical. But the FBI advocated for the deal. Musetti's information had already led to 17 arrests, millions in recovered assets, the closure of trafficking operations. His cooperation was valuable, more valuable than locking him away. Musetti walked out of the courthouse on a clear October afternoon. Elizabeth waited on the steps, Olive beside her, Allison watching from a distance, protective but accepting. He looked different. No expensive suit, just jeans and a simple shirt, his hair less styled, his posture less predatory. He moved like a man instead of a monster, walked like someone learning what freedom meant after years of building his own prison. When he reached Elizabeth, he didn't grab her, didn't demand, just stood there, uncertain, vulnerable, human. "Hi," he said, like they were meeting for the first time, like everything before was prologue. "Hi yourself." Elizabeth smiled, took his hand. "Ready to figure out what comes next?" Terrified. "But yeah, with you, I'm ready." They walked down the courthouse steps together, into sunlight, into uncertainty, into a future neither could have predicted but both were choosing. Behind them, the old world burned to ash. Ahead, something new, something fragile, something real. And for two people who'd survived impossible circumstances, that was enough. 2 years later, Elizabeth stood in her office overlooking Long Island Sound. The Moreno Foundation for Trauma Recovery occupied a renovated warehouse. Open concept, natural light, safe spaces designed for healing. 30 employees, 2 satellite locations, funding from anonymous donors who were becoming less anonymous as Musetti's businesses became legitimized. She'd rebuilt her life piece by piece, finished her doctorate, published research on trauma recovery in families affected by organized crime, spoke at conferences, trained other therapists, created something meaningful from the wreckage of her wedding night. But the memories still haunted her. Dreams of crystal shattering, gunfire in tunnels, Dumont dying in her arms, Musetti bleeding on a riverbank. Therapy helped. Her own therapist, Dr. Rebecca Ortiz, twice a week for the first year, once a week now, working through captivity trauma, survivor's guilt, the impossible complexity of loving someone who'd kidnapped you, who'd destroyed your life before rebuilding it into something unrecognizable. You're allowed to be happy, Dr. Ortiz kept saying. Trauma doesn't mean you forfeit joy. Complexity doesn't mean you're broken. You can hold multiple truths simultaneously. He hurt you. He saved you. You survived. You're thriving. All of it's real. Elizabeth was learning to believe that. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. Except she knew exactly who it was. They'd maintained distance for 18 months. His probation required minimal contact. Her healing required space. But they'd been circling back toward each other. Slow, careful, testing whether what they'd felt in crisis could survive in peace. The text was simple. Metropolitan Museum, 3 p.m. Caravaggio Gallery. If you're ready. She stared at the message for 10 minutes, then texted back, I'll be there. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was Elizabeth's sanctuary. She'd come here as a teenager after her parents died, walked the galleries, found solace in beauty that survived centuries. Caravaggio especially. His paintings were violent, dark, but honest. They showed humanity at its worst and somehow made it bearable. She arrived at 2:45, wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, nothing designed to impress, just herself. The woman she'd become after everything. She walked through European paintings, past Vermeer, past Rembrandt, into the Italian Baroque gallery. And there he was. Musetti Moreno stood in front of Judith beheading Holofernes. The same painting that hung in his study. The one he'd been staring at the night he'd forced her to call Patrick. He looked different. Lighter. His hair was longer, less styled. He wore khakis and a navy sweater. Normal. He could have been any museum visitor. Any man appreciating Renaissance violence on a Thursday afternoon. Except he wasn't. He was the man who'd kidnapped her. Who'd shielded her. Who'd shown her that monsters could choose humanity. Who'd spent 2 years proving that choice wasn't temporary. He turned, saw her. Something in his expression cracked. Relief, joy, fear. You came. You asked. Elizabeth moved beside him, studied the painting. Judith holding Holofernes' head, the general who'd threatened her people. She'd seduced him, killed him, saved her city. Violence as salvation, darkness as light. You always loved this painting. I thought I understood it. Judith as the hero, Holofernes as the monster who deserved death. Musetti's voice was quieter now, less command, more conversation. But I was wrong. Judith's not celebrating. Look at her face. She's haunted. Doing what's necessary doesn't erase the cost. Survival doesn't mean victory. When did you figure that out? About 6 months into probation. I was working with the FBI, dismantling networks I'd helped build, testifying against men I'd called brothers, saving people by destroying others. And I realized Judith and I were the same. We did terrible things for supposedly good reasons, and we both have to live with that forever. Elizabeth studied his profile. The man who'd been so controlled, so armored. He was vulnerable now, open. The 2 years apart had changed him. Working with law enforcement, mandatory therapy, community service at a youth center in the Bronx. Teaching kids that violence wasn't strength, that there were other ways to survive trauma. How's the consulting work? She asked. Exhausting, complicated. Some days I help catch actual predators. Other days I'm essentially a snitch destroying people who were just trying to survive like I was. He rubbed his face. Tired. But it's necessary. The information I have saves lives, stops trafficking, recovers victims. So I keep doing it even when it feels like I'm betraying everyone I used to know. That's called growth. Feels more like penance. Maybe it's both. Elizabeth turned to face him fully. I heard about the youth center, about the mentoring program you started, teaching conflict resolution to at-risk teenagers. Who told you? Allison. She's been monitoring you, making sure you're actually changing, not just performing for the courts. Elizabeth smiled. She said you're good with the kids, patient, honest about your past. They respect you because you don't pretend to be something you're not. I'm trying to give them what I never had. Options. Someone who understands their world but shows them there's a way out. Musetti's hands shook slightly, nervous, uncertain. This man who'd once exuded control. I'll never erase what I've done, the people I've hurt, the lives I've destroyed, but maybe I can balance the scales slightly. Save a few kids from becoming what I was. You're not giving yourself enough credit. And you're giving me too much. I'm still the man who kidnapped you, Elizabeth, who terrorized you, who forced you to destroy your marriage. No amount of community service changes that. You're right, it doesn't change the past, but it changes the future. It changes who you're becoming. Elizabeth stepped closer. Close enough to touch, but not touching. 2 years ago, you asked me if I feared you or what you reminded me of. Remember? Every day. I have an answer now. I feared what you represented. Uncontrolled trauma. Violence as solution. Men who hurt because they were hurt. But you? She finally reached out. Her hand on his chest. Over his heart. Feeling it beat. Steady. Human. You scared me because you showed me something I wasn't ready to see. That people can be multiple things simultaneously. Monster and victim. Captor and protector. Broken and healing. All at once. All real. Musetti's hand covered hers. Held it against him. What about now? Do I still scare you? Terrify me. But for different reasons. Elizabeth's voice dropped. Intimate. Honest. I'm scared of how much I've missed you. How much I want this to work despite how impossible it is. How much I love a man I should hate. That's terrifying. I love you too. Never stopped. Spent 2 years trying to become someone worthy of that love. Someone you could choose without trauma clouding your judgment. Someone who could stand beside you without pulling you into darkness. His other hand cupped her face. Gentle. Reverent. I took a victim and found my salvation. That's the truth. You saved me, Elizabeth. From myself. From the monster I was becoming. From a life that would have ended in prison or death or worse. I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I just reminded you it was possible. Then let me say it differently. Musetti's forehead pressed against hers, breathing the same air, sharing the same impossible moment. I stole you to break a man. You stayed to rebuild one. And somehow that became the most real thing in my life. The only thing that makes sense in a world that shouldn't forgive me but somehow does. Patrick's remarried, Elizabeth said, not changing the subject, just completing the picture. Happy. His wife is pregnant. He sent me a Christmas card last year. Said he hoped I'd found peace. That he'd forgiven me for falling in love with my captor because he'd fallen out of love with me long before the wedding. Does that hurt? It did, for a while. But honestly, we would have been miserable. He wanted safe, predictable. A life where nothing challenged him. I wanted. She laughed softly. I didn't know what I wanted. Until you showed me. Until I realized I needed someone who understood darkness because they'd lived in it. Someone who'd fight to be better because they knew what worse looked like. That's me? The man you need? Apparently. Despite all logic. Despite all advice. Despite everything that should make this impossible. Elizabeth pulled back slightly. Met his eyes. But I need to know this is real. Not crisis bonding. Not trauma repetition. Not me trying to fix you because fixing people is what I do. I need to know that if we do this, we're building something sustainable. Something that survives mundane Tuesdays and grocery shopping and arguments over where to spend Thanksgiving. I can't promise perfect. Can't promise easy. I'm in therapy 3 times a week. I have nightmares. Some days I wake up and remember everything I've done and wonder why anyone lets me walk free. Musetti's voice cracked. Raw. Real. But I can promise honest. I can promise I'll keep choosing to be better. Keep working to deserve you. Keep building a life where redemption isn't just a word but an action I take every single day. That's all I need to hear. She kissed him. Not the desperate kiss from the mansion. Not the passionate kiss from the hospital. This was different. Softer. It was recognition. 2 broken souls who'd found each other in violence and chosen to rebuild in peace. It was acknowledgement that love born from darkness could still grow toward light. That trauma could be transformed into something beautiful, if you were brave enough to try. When they pulled apart, Musetti smiled. Genuine. Hopeful. The kind of smile she'd never seen during captivity. Allison invited me to Thanksgiving. Did you know? She mentioned it. Said you better not screw it up or she'd shoot you herself. Your sister's terrifying. She's protective. There's a difference. Elizabeth took his hand, laced their fingers together. Natural. Easy. Right. So, where do we go from here? Dinner? Normal date? No kidnapping? No gunfire? Just two people who survived impossible circumstances trying to figure out if they work in ordinary ones? That sounds perfect. They walked through the museum together, past centuries of art, past violence and beauty and humanity in all its complexity. They talked about the Foundation, his consulting work, Olive's new relationship, Allison's grudging acceptance, Patrick's baby announcement, the ordinary details of extraordinary lives trying to become normal. Outside, the city hummed with evening traffic. People rushed home from work. Couples walked hand in hand. Vendors sold hot dogs and pretzels. Life continued, unaware, uncaring. That two people carrying impossible histories were choosing each other despite every reason not to. Thank you, Musetti said as they stood on the museum steps. For giving me another chance. For seeing who I could be instead of just who I was. For loving me when I didn't deserve it. You do deserve it. You've earned it. 2 years of work, of change, of proving that redemption isn't just theory. Elizabeth squeezed his hand. Besides, I'm selfish. I love who I am when I'm with you. Someone brave enough to believe that darkness can transform into light, that monsters can become human, that wedding nights ending in kidnapping can somehow lead to real love. They descended the steps together, into twilight, into possibility, into a future neither could have predicted but both were choosing. The old world was ash, the old empire was demolished. But from those ruins, they were building something different, something clean, something real. And for two people who'd survived the impossible, that was everything. 3 years after the wedding that never was, Elizabeth Jackson stood in the main hall of the Moreno Foundation, watching miracles happen in real time. Thanksgiving, the foundation's annual celebration. 50 families gathered, children laughing, parents healing, proof that trauma didn't have to be a life sentence, that violence could end, that new generations could break cycles their parents couldn't escape. The foundation had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. 3 locations now: Long Island, Brooklyn, the Bronx. Over 100 employees. Partnerships with hospitals, schools, law enforcement. Funding from Musetti's fully legitimized businesses. Real estate development, construction. Import operations stripped of anything illegal and rebuilt into something clean. It had taken years. Audits, investigations. Proving to the world that the Moreno name could mean something other than violence. Olive Berkeley moved through the crowd with confidence Elizabeth hadn't seen in years. Co-director, event coordinator. The woman who'd nearly died trying to save her best friend had transformed that trauma into purpose. She'd gotten her master's in social work, specialized in crisis intervention. Became the person she'd needed when Cleto's men took her. Table 3 needs more turkey, Olive said, passing Elizabeth. And the Ramirez kids are asking about dessert. Also, your fiancé is stress, cooking in the kitchen. Might want to check on him before he makes enough stuffing to feed the entire borough. Elizabeth smiled. Fiancé. The word still felt surreal. She glanced at her left hand. Simple platinum band with a single diamond. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing designed to impress. Just a promise made quietly 3 months ago in Street. Patrick's Cathedral. Musetti had taken her there after Sunday Mass. Dropped to one knee in an empty pew. No speech. No grand gesture. Just a question. Will you marry me? Not because I took you. Not because of what we survived. But because I love you. Because I want to build a life with you. Because you make me believe redemption is possible. She'd said yes before he finished. Cried. Laughed. Kissed him in a church that had seen centuries of prayers and promises. Allison had been there. Waiting in the back. Olive too. They'd planned it. Conspired. Given their blessing by witnessing. Father Travis had found them afterward. The elderly priest who'd married Elizabeth and Patrick. Who'd visited Musetti during his probation. Who'd become an unlikely spiritual advisor to a former mafia boss trying to find God in the wreckage of his past. Congratulations, Father Travis had said simply. God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he breaks us to rebuild us. Sometimes he takes us through darkness to show us what light really means. I'll be honored to marry you both, when you're ready. When the world's ready to accept what God already has. That would be next spring. Small ceremony. Close friends. No Plaza Hotel. No 300 guests. Just the people who'd earned their place in this impossible story. Just the family they'd chosen after the one fate gave them fell apart. Elizabeth walked to the kitchen, found Musetti exactly where Olive predicted, apron on, hands covered in flour, making a third batch of stuffing while the first two cooled on the counter. Stress cooking. His tell. When emotions got overwhelming, he cooked. Italian recipes his mother taught him. Comfort food from a childhood that had equal parts love and violence. "We have enough food to feed everyone twice," Elizabeth said from the doorway. "They're kids who've seen too much. They deserve seconds, thirds, as much as they want." He didn't look up, kept mixing. Methodical. Controlled. "Besides, cooking calms me." "What's got you anxious?" "Everything. This. Us. The fact that 3 years ago I kidnapped you and now we're engaged. The fact that some of these families, their trauma came from men I knew, worked with, protected. I look at these kids and wonder how many of them lost fathers because of choices I made, deals I brokered, violence I enabled." Elizabeth moved behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, rested her head between his shoulder blades. "You can't change the past. You can only shape the future. And look at what you're shaping. This foundation, these programs, these families getting support they'd never have otherwise. That's your legacy now, not the empire you inherited, not the violence you perpetrated. This, healing, hope, second chances. Some days I believe that. Other days I'm just a criminal in an apron pretending to be redeemed. You're not pretending. You're doing the work. Every single day. Therapy, consulting with law enforcement, mentoring at-risk youth, funding programs, showing up. That's real transformation. That's earned redemption." Musetti turned in her arms. His hands cupped her face, still dusted with flour, probably getting it in her hair. She didn't care. "I don't deserve you. Lucky for you, I don't care about deserving. I care about choosing. And I choose you. Every day. Not the man you were. The man you're becoming. The man who stress cooks stuffing at non-profit Thanksgivings because he cares too much about kids who've survived trauma." He kissed her. Soft. Sweet. Tasting like sage and gratitude. When they pulled apart, Father Travis stood in the doorway, white collar, kind eyes. The spiritual anchor both of them needed. "Am I interrupting?" the priest asked. "Never, Father." Musetti wiped his hands. Removed the apron. "What can we do for you?" "Actually, I came to ask you both something. The Ramirez family, their daughter, Camila, she's 7, lost her father in gang violence 6 months ago. She asked if she could say grace before dinner. Wants to pray for people who've lost parents like she has. I thought perhaps you both might join her. Show these families that survival is possible, that love can grow from grief." Elizabeth and Musetti exchanged glances. This was exposure, vulnerability, standing before dozens of families and acknowledging their shared trauma. But that was the point. That was the healing. Showing that wounds could transform into wisdom, that broken people could rebuild, that darkness could birth light. "We'd be honored," Elizabeth said. They gathered everyone in the main hall, tables arranged in a massive square, food covering every surface. The Ramirez family stood, Camila between her mother and older brother, small, brave, carrying grief that no 7-year-old should know. "I want to say thank you," Camila began, voice clear, strong. "Thank you to Miss Elizabeth and Mr. Musetti for making this place, for helping people like us. People who lost someone. People who hurt. People who thought they'd always be sad but are learning to be happy again." Her mother squeezed her shoulder, pride and pain mixing on her face. Camila continued. "My dad died. Bad people shot him. I was angry at God, at everyone. But Miss Elizabeth said that's okay. That anger means we loved them. That grief means they mattered. And that one day, the sad will be smaller, and the happy will be bigger. I don't know if that's true yet, but I want to believe it. So I'm thankful. For this food, for these people, for second chances. Amen." "Amen," the room echoed. Elizabeth's vision blurred with tears. Musetti's hand found hers under the table, squeezed. They sat with these families. Ate, laughed, listened to stories of survival and hope, watched children play who'd witnessed violence, watched mothers smile who'd buried husbands, watched healing happen in real time. Imperfect, incomplete, but happening. Later, after the families left, after the cleanup finished, after Olive and Father Travis departed with promises to meet for wedding planning, Elizabeth and Musetti stood on the foundation's terrace, overlooking the Hudson River, the same river that flowed past the mansion where everything began, where her wedding night ended and something else started. The city glowed below them, Manhattan's lights reflecting on dark water, boats moving silently, the world continuing its rotation, unaware of the miracle that had happened here. Two people who should have remained enemies, captor and victim, criminal and survivor, instead becoming partners, lovers. Proof that redemption wasn't myth but possibility. "I've been thinking about that night," Musetti said quietly. "The Plaza Hotel, the kidnapping, everything that came after. I've replayed it 1,000 times. Wondered what would have happened if I'd made different choices. If I'd never taken you. If I'd found another way to hurt Patrick. If I'd stayed the monster my uncle created. Regrets? Some. I regret hurting you, terrifying you, destroying your wedding, but I can't regret where we ended up. Can't regret falling in love with you. Can't regret becoming someone who actually deserves the life he's building. Is that selfish? To be grateful for something that started in violence?" Elizabeth turned to face him. This man she'd feared, and fought, and finally chosen. "I think it's human. We don't get to control how stories begin, only how they develop, how they end. You could have stayed a monster. I could have stayed a victim. Instead, we chose different narratives, different endings. That's not selfish. That's survival." Musetti pulled her close, his arms around her waist, her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady, alive, real. "I stole you to break a man. You stayed to rebuild one. That's the truth. The whole truth. I took you as a weapon. You transformed me into something human. And I stayed because love doesn't always start with light," Elizabeth replied softly, looking up at him, this impossible man who'd become her future. "Sometimes it begins in the dark. Sometimes it's born from trauma and survives despite it. Sometimes the most broken people create the strongest bonds because they understand that healing isn't linear, that redemption isn't guaranteed, that choosing love after violence is the bravest thing we can do. Do you think we'll make it, long term? Or is this just prolonged trauma bonding that'll fall apart when real life gets boring? I think we've already survived boring. We've survived 3 years of ordinary Tuesdays and grocery shopping and arguments over wedding venues. We've survived your nightmares and my therapy appointments and family dinners where Allison still occasionally threatens to shoot you. If we can survive that, we can survive anything." Musetti laughed. Genuine. Free. The sound of a man who'd finally forgiven himself enough to feel joy. "Your sister does still scare me." "Good. Keeps you honest." Elizabeth smiled, then grew serious. "I love you. Not despite our history, but including it. Not ignoring what happened, but accepting that it's part of our story. We're not a fairy tale. We're something messier, realer. Two broken people who found each other in darkness and chose to walk toward light together. That's enough for me. More than enough. It's everything to me." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, tender, reverent, like she was something precious he'd almost lost but somehow got to keep. "Thank you, for seeing me, for staying, for believing I could be more than the monster I was. Thank you for proving me right." They stood there as the city glowed below, as the river flowed past, as the world continued spinning. Two survivors of impossible circumstances, two people who'd transformed trauma into healing, two souls who'd found each other in violence and chosen peace. Above them, stars began appearing, pinpricks of light in gathering darkness, proof that even in the blackest night, illumination was possible, that beauty could emerge from chaos, that love could grow from the most unlikely soil. Elizabeth Jackson, former bride, former hostage, now director of a trauma foundation and fiancée to a reformed criminal. She'd lost one life and built another. She'd survived darkness and found light. She'd been stolen and chosen to stay. And somehow, impossibly, that had become the truest love story of her life. Musetti Moreno, former mafia boss, former monster, now consultant, mentor, partner in healing. He'd built an empire of violence and watched it burn. He'd kidnapped a woman and fallen in love instead. He'd been offered vengeance and chosen redemption. And somehow, impossibly, that had saved him. They kissed as the city glowed below them, as the stars emerged above, as the river flowed between their past and their future. It wasn't the kiss from a wedding that never finished. Wasn't the desperate kiss from a burning mansion. Wasn't even the tentative kiss from a museum reunion. This was the kiss of two people who'd earned each other, who'd survived the impossible, who'd transformed darkness into light through sheer stubborn refusal to stay broken. This was redemption, complete, imperfect, real, and it was enough. And that's where today's story ends. If this touched your heart, or made you think a little deeper about life, love, or choices, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every message, and they mean more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep believing in better days.